Hi everyone, welcome to Doc Hill's Study, where I help you get ready for your National 5 biology assessments. In this video we'll be walking through questions from an official SQA paper. The paper and the marking guide are both produced by the Scottish Qualifications Authority, the SQA, and all rights to that material belong to them. I'm using these resources strictly for educational purposes here on this non-commercial channel to support students like you in preparing for your exams. I'll be using the SQA's marking guide to highlight what answers are accepted, but keep in mind it usually only shows some of the correct answers and doesn't explain the reasoning behind them. That's where I come in. For each question, I'll walk you through the thinking process, explain what the question is really asking, and point out some of the common pitfalls to avoid. If anything doesn't make sense to you, or you want to ask about a specific point, feel free to leave a comment. I'll do my best to help you out. If you find this helpful, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future walkthroughs. Let's get started. Okay, this is National 5 Biology 2024, and this is the first question, question number 1. So let's have a read at this. Euglena is a single-celled organism found in water. Okay, the diagram shows some of the structures within Euglena. Now here's a picture of an organism. Now you probably haven't studied Euglena. Again, this is unfamiliar information. You haven't come across this fellow before. And what we're looking at here is a cell. It's a single-celled organism, so they've told you that in the question. They've told you that. And it's not the kind of plant cell that we're normally used to looking at. It's got this thing for starters, and it has a cell membrane and it has a chloroplast. Okay, so it also has this thing in the middle, which is the subject of the first question. So the subject of the first question is name structure A. So this structure here, well, we've got the chloroplasts, and we see that we have chloroplasts, therefore we know it has to be a complex cell, or what we call a eukaryote. Your teacher may not have taught you about eukaryotes because it's not technically on the syllabus for National 5 biology. But that means that it has to have a nucleus, and this is the nucleus. Now the nucleus is a double membrane structure with pores in it to allow the messenger RNA out of the nucleus. And you may have learned nucleus in that detail, but you may have just learned that it's the big organelle in the center of the cell that contains the DNA. But anyway, with any luck, you're able to do that. Most candidates were able to do that according to the report. So I'm going to write in here, nucleus is structure A. Nucleus. Okay, very good. And we also have to give the function of the chloroplast. Well, we know what a chloroplast does. Hopefully everybody does, because it's the most important biological reaction there is, as far as we're concerned anyway, and it carries out photosynthesis. So your definition of the chloroplast is the site of photosynthesis. The function of the chloroplast is photosynthesis. So that's all you need to write to get the mark in that question. Okay? You could say site of photosynthesis, but that's photosynthesis will get you the mark. Okay, suggest why Euglena is not a typical plant cell. Right, well, there's a couple of things here that we need to pay attention to. First of all, it's not actually talking about a structure here, but we can look at two structures that are not typical in the Euglena, and in fact 2 of them, or 3 of them, are here, and 2 of them are not here. Well, the probable issue here is that we're looking for things that aren't here. So in a plant cell, we know that we have to have a cell wall. A typical plant cell will have a cell wall. Okay, so it's got no cell wall. A typical plant cell will have a large central vacuole, which it uses to pump up its cells to maintain the structure of the plant. And this doesn't have a large central vacuole. These little tiny things here might be vacuoles, but it's got no large central vacuole. So we might have to, in our answer, if we're going to choose vacuole, we might have to distinguish between those little tiny vacuoles perhaps, and a large one. You're only getting 1 mark for this. You're only going to have to name one. And I would stick in that it doesn't have a cell wall, so no cell wall. Okay, that'll get you the marks, right? Now, You might also have noticed this thing, and you may have learned enough about cell biology to understand that that is a flagellum. And you could say that it has a flagellum, which is another structure that makes this different from a plant cell, but that wasn't actually mentioned in the marking scheme as getting the mark, so I don't know. It should get the mark because most plant cells do not have flagella. And another one is a behavior, right? Most plant cells do not move freely. They're mostly attached to other cells. And if you were struggling on that question, you might have come down here and said, oh, they can travel 1.3 body lengths in 1 second. So you come down to this question, you discover they can move. If you haven't had an answer for this one, you might say they can move. Now, it suggests why it's not a typical plant cell, and they haven't said it has to be a structure, so it could be a behavior. Again, that doesn't appear in the marking scheme, probably because nobody picked it as an answer. I'm just trying to cover all the bases. But if you said it's motile, or it can move, I would suggest that should get the mark, but it's not in the marking scheme, so I'm not sure. All right? Anyway, stick to the obvious, stick to the things you've learned if you can. No cell wall on here. We would normally see a thicker line on the outside of this cell. We'd see a thick line on the outside of that cell representing a cell wall. You could say also, let's put an also in, no large central vacuole. I think that has to be a bigger answer. Although they've accepted just vacuole, but I suspect that these things are little tiny vacuoles, so They accepted vacuole as just your answer. So you could have said no cell wall, no vacuole. You have to put no in. It's absent. Okay? All right. Question C. This is the one that quite a few candidates managed okay, as far as I can tell from the report. So the average body length of a euglena is 50 micrometers. Okay, so from one end to the other is 50 micrometers. So that's body length is 50 micrometers. So make sure you've got your measurements and the numbers labeled. They can travel 1.3 body lengths in 1 second. 1 second, okay. So calculate how many micrometers a euglena could travel in 30 seconds. Okay, so it can travel 1.3 body lengths in 1 second. So 1.3 per second. All right, that's nice and easy. Body lengths, we'll call that BL, shall we? We'll just give that a little unit. 1 BL equals 50 micrometers. If you don't know the unit, the symbol for micrometers, that's it there, the mu symbol. And okay, so we need to know how far it can travel in 1 second to start with. So I'm going to multiply, so 50 times 1.3. 1.3 is going to equal the distance it moves in 1 second. So let's get my calculator out. I'm not going to do that in my head. On 50 times 1.3 equals 65. 65 micrometers in 1 second. So therefore, it's going to be 65 times 30 in 30 seconds. I'm just running out of room to write my answer in, so 65 times 30 equals 1,950. And they give you a nice thing to write here, and they give you the unit so you don't have to remember it. Okay, there's the answer to question 1. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching this walkthrough from Doc Hill Study. I hope it helped you feel more confident about tackling these kinds of questions. Remember, the answers I've used are based on the SQA marking guide, but it's always important to understand the reasoning behind them, not just memorize the words. That's why I focus on the process, not just the final answer. If you've got any questions, or if something didn't quite click, drop a comment below and I'll get back to you. If you found this helpful, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified when the next walkthrough goes up. Good luck with your revision, and I'll see you in the next one.